Hey everyone, today I'm covering a single electrifying moment in aviation history, Charles Lindbergh's solo nonstop flight from New York to Paris in May 1927 in the Spirit of St. Louis. It wasn't just a record, it was a turning point that rewired how the public, investors, and governments thought about air travel. After World War I, flight technology was advancing, but transatlantic travel by airplanes still sounded outrageous. In 1919, Raymond Ortega offered $25,000 to the first aviator to fly nonstop between New York and Paris. For years, attempts failed tragically and fatally from other pilots who attempted it, most being lost at sea. By 1927, well-funded teams with multi-engine aircraft were preparing to try again, and Charles Lindbergh was a 25-year-old U.S. airmail pilot backed by businessmen from St. Louis. His plan was radically different than everybody else's. His idea was to go lighter, go solo, and trust one exceptionally reliable engine. Lindbergh's aircraft, called the Spirit of St. Louis, was built in San Diego, actually, and in about 2 months. It was a custom adaptation of the Ryan M2. It had no windshield because the main fuel tanks were placed ahead of the cockpit to keep the center of gravity forward and protect the pilot should he crash. Lindbergh used side windows and a small periscope for being able to see in front of the plane. The engine that he chose to use was a 9-cylinder Wright J5C Whirlwind with about 223 horsepower. Famous for its reliability. The airplane carried about 450 gallons of fuel to be able to fly the 3,600-mile flight. He took off from Roosevelt Field in Long Island on the morning of May 20th, 1927. He narrowly cleared the treetops because he was taken off from a dirt runway that I believe it rained the night before, so it was muddy, causing more drag and kind of changing his calculations a little bit. And he ended up making it to France after 33 and a half hours with no sleep, navigating mainly by dead reckoning, with help from just a simple basic 6-pack and visual cues. He spotted Paris and landed at Le Bourget, pardon my lack of French, on May 21st to a very ecstatic and large crowd. And he had just completed the first solo nonstop New York to Paris flight and claimed the $25,000 Ortega prize. And the flight proved that long endurance flights could be practical, not just a stunt. And by prioritizing reliability, range, and weight discipline over those that were going with multi-engines that were heavier and having more power, his choice of using a single engine, minimal equipment, and a custom fuel system optimized the mission profile, and then they built the plane around those parameters. And that approach influenced more long-range aircraft building and thinking for years. The flight changed the public's opinion. Newspapers, photographs, and newsreels transformed Lindbergh into an instant global celebrity. And the Lindbergh boom that followed drove investments, boosted flight schools, accelerated airline development, far beyond just winning the $25,000 prize. In short, a privately sponsored challenge changed the entire industry. The Spirit of St. Louis itself became a teaching artifact and is actually in the National Aerospace Museum in Washington, D.C. And you can still go and see it hanging from the ceiling and it's kind of just become a staple piece and a frozen blueprint of the 1920s. And lastly, Lindbergh's own words kind of help us understand like the human aspect of it, the fatigue, the isolation over the North Atlantic, and the discipline that he had, but also like the simplicity of his plan and how he went about problem solving it. His first person testimony turned the technical feat into, you know, a human story, and they actually made a movie on it that I just watched recently. And I honestly didn't really know much about this until watching the movie, and then when I saw that we had this assignment, I knew that that's what I wanted to learn more about. And you know, ultimately, like, this one flight didn't just cross an ocean, it crossed a psychological barrier that kind of took aviation from what most thought was just a stunt to a viable means of transportation. Thanks for watching.